everybody. I'm Stephanie Rich. I am head of platform at Bread and Butter Ventures and entrepreneur in residence at Techstars Farm to Fork, where we bring in startups that deal in food and egg tech. Food and egg is such an interesting and growing area. We've got lots of really cool startups in it. And so I have brought in 4 awesome founders who are going to share today a little bit about how they took their companies from just an idea to actually growing companies with clients, with funding, all of that. So first of all, thank you so much to everybody who's here. I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves, starting with Sam. Why don't you go ahead?
Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Eder. I'm CEO and co-founder of Big Wheelbarrow. We're a SaaS B2B software company that helps grocery stores and food distributors get more local food to their end customers. And I sit right now in South Minneapolis.
Awesome. And Leena, what about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Leena Pradhan-Nabzdyk, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Canomiks, which is based out of Rochester, Minnesota. And we have a genomics and AI-based technology platform where we help companies in the functional food dietary supplement industry develop safe and efficacious products. And we do that by testing the effect of the ingredients that get used in these products at the level of gene expression. So how do these products and ingredients affect gene expression and thereby health and wellness?
Amazing. And Sue?
Yeah, that is amazing. Wow. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Marshall, and I am the founder and CEO of NetZero. I am based in Minneapolis, and NetZero is a state-of-the-art food upcycling platform that helps power the safe capture and conversion of industrial food and beverage byproducts into new sustainable upcycled ingredients at scale.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Nhat.
Oh, hi guys, I'm Nguyen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Otrafy. We are based right in downtown St. Paul in Minnesota. And Otrafy is an enterprise SaaS that automates the collection and transfer of food industry certification data. Our future vision is to be that source of truth for all the food history and food safety information in the food chain. So that's what we are.
Awesome. So thanks, Nhat. And let's stick with you for a minute. When you first started what became Otrafy, were you working on the same idea that you just shared with us right now?
So the vision is the same, but the product is definitely not, right? Like the first product when we were started Otrafy was we were working with organic farmers and allow them to share their story with the end customer through just a scan of QR code, right? And have it all on blockchain. That was like when we first started. But what we found through doing that process is a lot of the information that we share in this process can be used for them to meet their regulatory compliance needs as well. And no, last year when we came to Textile Program, we found that there's a much bigger opportunity by targeting the middle of the supply chain, which are food manufacturers, the big guys, and so that's why we focus on this current enterprise platform and really looking at those guys.
So what did the kind of process look like from when you first started and had this original idea to getting, like, how long did that take to get to the product that you're now focused on?
Yeah, I mean, exactly from when we had our first product until we actually have the second product launched, it was about 20 months. So that was a big thing for us, because we were working for like about 12 months on that first product, all the way until July last year, and the process of switching away from that, it was so hard, right? I still remember we're like, all right, we need to switch, but I don't want to stop looking at the thing that we were working on for a whole year and throw it away. So just park it. And I think it's just a process because once you park it, you never look back. I haven't touched back on it yet. So yeah. That's how long it takes. Yeah.
And Sam, you went through something similar, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first iteration of Big Wheelbarrow was a hyper local marketplace, and our learning from that helped create our current software was created to solve a problem for me running that business, and so that pivot from a marketplace to software was really big. It took us about a year total to kind of complete it. And I think that, you know, what the hardest part people don't realize is that in that pivot, so many things change for your company that a lot of your original assumptions no longer apply. And so being able to really reassess everything from soup to nuts, like, does your brand apply? Are the team members that you have applicable to this new process? All those things are things that you have to do while pivoting, or else you're going to end up kind of grinding for a while.
And how did you guys figure out that you needed to move on, that you needed to switch? Like, at what point
Ours was
not working?
Yeah, that was a real. So, you know, what's interesting was, as we're trying to grow Big Wheelbarrow as a marketplace, we kept on hearing and experiencing the same things. We kept on trying to do little strategy changes to try to speed our growth, get better at what we're doing. And we just kept on bumping into the same scaling problem. Once we developed technology that became the current Big Wheelbarrow, no-brainer, right? Because we saw the possibilities for growth, we saw the possibilities for impact, particularly on the local food ecosystem that we were passionate about. And so the decision for the team was relatively easy. It was just then reassessing everything and making sure that, you know, we had the right talent and we had the right focus. And that was probably the harder part of it.
And Sue, what about you? When you think about, you know, first coming up with the idea for NetZero, if you can share that a little bit with us, and then moving into what you are today, has it been kind of a linear path?
No, I'm like them as well. I wouldn't, well, linear in the vision, and I think Nhat kind of spoke to that. But when I created NetZero, it was like, okay, we're going to deal with food waste. There's 4 billion pounds of that a year. We knew right away we weren't going to tackle 40 billion. We narrowed it to 6 billion pounds of industrial food waste. So we went into that and thought, okay, there's so many food manufacturers and beverage manufacturers that have some to give us. No brainer. We'll just get some of that. We'll take our cool technology. That hasn't changed. We use the same type of technology and the same type of heat to convert that. But what we learned along the way, that it's a lot harder to say, I'm going to pick this up, I'm going to process it, and then I'm going to sell it to somebody else. So in that whole adventure of about 36 months, we decided it wasn't really about this really cool piece of equipment. It really was about a platform that connects the provider of those byproducts with a producer who's going to create new products for human consumption. So there's a lot more involved in that middle bridge, but becoming that bridge is where we found our power. We could really look at taking Earth's food that's already there and moving it forward. That's the best way to tackle food waste. You know, growing more food, we do not need more food. We have enough. We just have to look at how to use it and continue to use the nutrients that are there instead of wasting them. So our platform, it went from a piece of technology to a platform. And it really became strengthened just this past year, really, with the force of the upcycling food movement, which has been a true gift for us. That wasn't something in 2015 when I started this, that I would become this pioneer in this food upcycling movement and eventually a founding member of a trade association. All that is a gift, and I'm humbled to be part of it because these are the most passionate, intelligent people in the country, actually the world. We have now over 100 members in less than a year, and there are a lot of global people in there as well. They're all just as passionate about making a difference with food waste. So I really feel at this point, having the platform and those connections, that we can really look at sustainable change for food waste.
Amazing. So you talked a little bit about, you know, making some changes and having a process to figure out that platform. What did you actively do to figure that out? Was it customer research? Was it reaction? How did you come to that conclusion?
Oh, it was piloting on site, you know, with the people who have the food waste, whether that's eggshell waste or brewery spent grains, and other types of waste from people who make oat milk and all these different things, to really figure out what are their problems. You know, we can all make assumptions, but until you get in the plant and see what's going on, and then what are the opportunities with keeping it safe. I never said we were going to go out and get food out of a dumpster and then reprocess it. It's always still safe when we get it. we just extend it forward. So we have to really figure out what they're doing, why they're doing it, what they're able to do, what they can't do. And then on the other end, that's really the supply end. That's where we get it. And then the demand is where we really had to focus this past 2 years. It's one thing to say, now we have these new ingredients, you should put them in some bread. We really have to look at what is the demand for it? How do we help these food producers look at what consumers want, how much they're willing to pay? You know, why would they want to use upcycled food ingredients in a new product? And so thankfully, I didn't have to do this completely on my own. Folks like Renewal Mill and friends of mine that are just so great and have been in this for a long time like I have, coming together and help defining and looking at the demand and then helping those producers really come up with good products has been really exciting.
Awesome. And now, Leena, you use just a tremendous amount of data and technology in Canomiks. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was like to actually get to market? And do you think it took longer than a typical, you know, enterprise SaaS you might see?
Yeah, so just like everybody else here, we do have a pivot story as well, staying within the same technology. But our original idea was, so we started working with a lot of dietary supplement ingredients and started to figure out how do those ingredients affect human genes. And this was all based on using genomics and bioinformatics tools and really understanding at the deep molecular level. Because if we don't understand the ingredients, then we won't really understand how the final formulation would work, right? And we started accumulating a lot of data, created databases. My background, I have a PhD in pharmacology. My two other co-founders are also scientists. We all met at Harvard Medical School. So we come from a very clinical background. And so the other database that we were generating was around understanding the fingerprints, the genomic fingerprints of chronic conditions. And our goal in the beginning was to use the data, build algorithms on top of them, and then come up with recipes for targeting chronic conditions. And again, this is all based on the genomics data that we were gathering. And very soon we realized that you know, we are 3 scientists, co-founders. We don't have marketing experience. And just pretty much like everybody else here, when we were talking to the customers or our potential customers in the space, we started realizing that the bigger challenges are around the supply chain, around understanding the quality of the materials that get used in these products. So we were looking for, so we had a recipe that we had designed, and we were looking for the ingredients to put together this recipe and to further test it. And then we realized that there are like hundreds of suppliers, thousands of ingredients. Everybody's making all kinds of claims. Nobody really knows what's going on. So it was this wild, wild west. In the meantime, we were also providing R&D services to some other bigger nutrition companies. And they started talking to us about the same problem around how do we source the ingredients and how, and in some of their cases, they just stopped doing some of the work that they were doing around, so especially around botanical ingredients. And so then we realized, aha, you know, as scientists, we can definitely provide value here. We should start thinking about really creating a platform around benchmarking the ingredients and how they would affect human genes and thereby human health. And that's exactly what we are doing now. Once again, we are creating a lot of data. Eventually that we will use that data for, let's say, example, personalization, right? Like everybody has a different genomic setup, and what fits for me may not fit for somebody else. So that would be the personalization in the next step. But at the very fundamental level, at the very basic level, we really need to understand how these ingredients work, how they vary from each other, even from batch to batch. You may have a great supplier, but if the supplier has issues with the farm that has harvested the raw material or the plant at a different time than they're normally used to, then the end product gets affected. So there are all these challenges that we can, again, use our same technology, use our database technology to solve. So that's what we are doing. Yes, we do use a lot of data, however.
So kind of a question for all of you, since you've just all shared that you went through this pivot really early on. How do you take the rest of your team with you?
Good question. I mean, so well, actually, this is I tell the story when I'm talking to investors all the time, which was, in the early days of Big Wheelbarrow, we were working with 22 of Austin's best restaurants. We got treated like rock stars at restaurants because we knew the chefs were going in the back door all the time with all this amazing products, and they loved us. And we got our names are on menus, and I was like, when we shift away, that's all gonna end, right? Like no one's gonna care who we are anymore. Like it's a real consideration. but it's a joke in a sense that like it seems like minor now, but it was a factor for decision making on our culture and who we had at the time on the team and all that kind of stuff. But I had to build a business case, just like I would for the beginning of the first product, right? It was to present it and socialize it and do all the same legwork you do with potential investors, but with your team to make sure that everybody's involved and on the same page. Because I think that the hardest thing with the pivot is that people at different levels, if I'm in development, I may be chewing the weeds to see the roadblock that is causing the pivot to happen, or the opportunity on scale for something else. Maybe I'm going to be threatened, right, by the fact that our technology focus is going to shift dramatically from one way of thinking to another. Likewise, maybe my marketing skills are focused on, this direct sales model and doesn't apply to more, enterprise B2B software. All those factors you need to think about. So I think it is the hardest part, but the most important part of the pivot.
Yeah, and I think that you can pivot and still collaborate. And I'm a big believer in that. So if somebody gets no longer involved with NetZero directly, I've always said, okay, I will help you. I can refer you to somebody else who might have the right equipment, the right initiatives to help you with your food waste, but it's just not NetZero directly. So I'm a firm believer in collaboration. So I don't really necessarily say goodbye to someone forever. It's just how do we continue to help each other, but just not as direct. So they're still my friends, even they're still supportive of NetZero, just got a different end result.
It was pretty similar with us too. We are still using the same technology. We are just following a different vertical. We are not completely shutting down on the other idea of coming to the market with our own formulations. And like I said, our long-term vision is to do personalization and make food as medicine a reality. So that all still holds true. We just moved a little bit, laterally. That's all we did.
Yeah, I'm totally resonate with that. Like, with the team is like, keep everyone to the same vision, right? And the vision doesn't change. That's what we want to get to, that food safety information, really like building the infrastructure layer, right? And like from the beginning, I told the team like, hey, that's where we want to get to, but we all new founders here, right? I have no idea how we're going to get there. And, you work with us, we'll figure out the way. And so it's going to change along the way, but if you're willing to adapt to new things, there should be no problem. So. And for us, it's super important to pivot wasn't a surprise. Like, it's like next day, like, hey, we're gone, right? Like, it was a process. People know on all the conversation we were having until like, okay, we've got to retire the old product and work on something new. So yeah.
Got it. So you brought the team with you, essentially.
Yes.
So to go a little more even deeper tactically, Sam, can you talk about how long did it take you to get to your first ever like MVP after you had this idea of Big Wheelbarrow? What did that process look like?
Yeah, so it started really slow, to be honest. So I remember, probably June of the year of 2016, we were talking about the problem, just mulling it over, thinking about what this could look like. But it wasn't until August that we buckled down and said, hey, you know what? There's something here. We need to invest time and effort to start to scope it out. After that, it was pretty much 3 months between the beginning, our kind of initial discovery to the design and launch. And we launched in January of 2017 with the very first pilot. Now the pivot took a lot longer because of, it was more complex. But that took, probably a year to really kind of go through the same iterations with proof of concepts and all that kind of stuff. and then, you know, solidifying a solid offering set, and then going and selling the next big enterprise. That was a lot longer.
And Leena, did you have a kind of a similar experience of, you know, going quickly at the beginning and then kind of rethinking?
Yeah, so we actually, you know, spent some time in the beginning, you know, pitching about our idea of our formulations that we are bringing to the market. But then, like I said, soon we realized people found value in what we are doing for us, you know, our expertise in science and technology. And in fact, the pivot just happened because it was organic. Bigger companies started coming to us and saying, hey, you know, we don't want to license your formulations, but we really love the cool technology that you're using. Can you help us in our product development with your cool technology? So it just organically happened. But the other challenge that we had was we were doing these one-off projects, and how do we scale that, right? And so that's what we are building out right now. And as you know, we are now part of Techstars Farm to Fork Accelerator for this year. And our goal during that program is to really get help from mentors on helping with the scaling, and how do we scale this model of consulting that we have to like a whole platform. So yeah.
Awesome. And so all four of you are in different aspects of the food industry, the broad, you know, value chain that we call the food industry. Stu, can you talk a little bit about what it's like to be in the food industry versus, you know, a social network site or something like that that people might kind of romanticize when they think about startups?
Yeah, food is interesting. I've always been an entrepreneur. I spent several decades, so you're going to probably be able to tell how old I am, but most of my entrepreneurial skills were in the real estate industry. So I've grown numerous types of businesses within real estate. And real estate is all about any kind of real estate projects about collaboration. You can't do a really nice project in real estate without collaborating. Funding is pretty straightforward. The projections are based on proven models for real estate development work. Very little is innovative, to be honest with you. And probably one reason why I felt like I should change. It wasn't a lot of innovation going on there. I find being involved in food tech and the broader value chain for food, it's all about innovations. It's super exciting. Everybody I meet, like everybody today on the panel, I'm just like, wow, this is cool stuff. So very exciting. In fact, the only way we can all make a difference, you know, in the food system to address social and environmental justices is really that innovation part. So I embrace that completely. The challenges, however, on that is funding. You know, the more innovative, the more collaborative, the more investors have a hard time getting their arms around it. And so, you know, it tends to scare people off when you talk about platforms and all these people helping you, you know, and I totally get that. So that's been the challenge for me, is trying to understand how to make it really simply communicated so people can really look at it, at the numbers and see how that all jives together. So, you know, it's challenging that often, you know, people are working in their own silos. And so to get people in the food chain together to talk, I love doing that. So that's my skill. So it's challenging, but it's also where I live and where I thrive. So even though it might be opposite of real estate and some other industries, at the end of the day, I would still choose to, and I'm glad I switched my careers and got into food, because I know we all of us today on the panel have so much to bring to change the food system that it's exciting.
Awesome. And Nhat, you're new to the Minnesota food and egg system. What have you found this kind of scene is like here?
Yeah, no, and not just Minnesota. I'm actually from the financial service industry background. So, you know, coming into the food industry is a lot thanks to my co-founder Lucas' background, and I get to learn a lot about it. And for me, I do feel like, you know, was a surprise coming in the first time to see, like, you know, how much more innovation we can really introduce into the food industry, and like how behind it was compared to like the financial service where I'm from. But at the same time, I found, like, you know, people here are super passionate about what they do. You know, in the financial service, we can, yeah, whatever, like, you know, if we make some money, we make some money, right? But in food industry, like, hey, we actually solving real problems, like, you know, lives are impacted, and really we want to make sure that we do the right things and be able to be responsible for what we do. So, like, you know, super excited. And in the Minnesota food scene as well, like, I mean, being in the Midwest, there's so many food manufacturers around here that we're talking to, and, you know, everyone kind of recognize that kind of we want to support the innovation. So we get those conversations, people excited to talk to us, and knowing that we're based in this area is super helpful for us to continue to those conversations. So yeah, real like it around here.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Nat was saying about what's special about the Twin Cities ecosystem in particular, we have all these large food industries, but also Minnesota is, has a very large and long historical part in our food systems in general. And so, when you talk to folks, it's not, most people we talk to are, one generation or two generations removed from the farm. They go back to farms with regularity. They are tied, somehow in their family to agriculture or food production in some way, shape, or form in some way, right? So it's really rare, to find people who are just kind of oblivious to how the food system works here, which is refreshing and great, because if you are pitching, a food business in an area, especially in supply chain, in areas where people don't know, oh man, it's a long education process for sure.
Yeah, okay, let's dive into that a little bit about just like educating when you first come up with this cool concept. Like, Leena, what has your experience has been in terms of, recently I know you've been talking to lots of people about this very complex element of the food industry. What's some advice for entrepreneurs as they're getting started and trying to explain these kind of unknown or complex portions of the food value chain?
Yeah, so again, I come from a very scientific background, and it has been a challenge for me to explain it in layman's terms, like exactly what our technology does. And I think a big part of all of this is to really, although we work with other companies, I think a big part of my company and overall is to really educate people about food and nutrition and how we should look at food and how we should think about nutrition as more than just, passing time and just eating something. We really, we nowadays we think about personalizing everything, right? Like, I want a certain, set of shoes or pair of, I don't know, earrings, and everything is, we pay so much attention, but then the one thing that we should really pay attention to is what we ingest and what we put in our mouth. And so little attention, at least that was my experience up until, very recently, that I didn't pay that much attention. Okay, I'm just eating something. Now I look at every single package of, be it an ingredient I'm buying or a finished food product that I'm buying. I literally look at the back of it and see where what is in there, etc. So I think a big part of all of this, at least for us from where we come from, is really educating the end consumer about the value that food can bring, especially given the current situation of COVID and the illnesses that we have. I think we have to start thinking about food as something that we can, it's almost like medicine, right? You have to think about food as medicine, as a preventative medicine. And, how can we use that to really, tackle the chronic disease situation in our country, especially. So, yeah, there's a lot of education that needs to happen on the consumer end.
And Sue, I'm guessing you have some experience in too of kind of educating people.
Yeah, I do. This is a COVID silver lining. So I, like Leena, it's all about consumers understanding, what are they eating, what's in it, asking the questions, right? So during COVID, we were processing at some breweries and distilleries, and so they shut down. So I happened to have a lot of spent grain, a few hundred pounds, had it milled. And somebody said, well, you should be doing something with that. There's no flour in the stores. I did not know there wasn't any flour in the stores. I wasn't paying attention. And what's interesting is I put my social media group on it. I'm like, just get on it, share, we'll do it. Even if we have to give it away, we're going to, make some products that they can actually use at home and they can experience it, and then they can eat it, and they can have their families involved in cooking and baking. Wow. Okay. I had no idea that was going to literally put the demand side way up. And we found that across the board within the upcycling food movement and the industry, is that people were at home and they started to ask, what is this? Where does it come from? That's interesting. I didn't know that. I actually didn't realize I should be eating this instead of this. And so being involved in social media and capturing that, and we're continuing that and putting more of that into it because, you know, recipes and back to what Leena was saying, what are the nutrients in there? What does that do to your body if you have more protein and more fiber, you know? So I became this nutritional person, and I'm not, Leena is, but I'm like, okay, I guess we just going to go with it and we're going to continue the education. So I love that part of it. And that brings more success to the food producers that are going to make these products. So COVID silver lining is what I call it. And it was fun, a lot of fun.
And Nhat, what's your experience been in terms of educating maybe people at more corporate level in terms of certifications and kind of the food safety process?
Yeah, so I guess for us, it's a little bit easier in terms of, like, you know, education in terms of the subject matter expert, because you know, we are working closely with a quality assurance professional, right? So they've been doing this their whole life. They've been, like, you know, collecting information. They know way better than us in terms of, like, what data they're looking for and things like that, right? But what really the education part is in terms of, hey, like, you know, you traditionally this been working well. You've been able to collect this via email, via Excel, via paper. You got the data, great. Now let us show you how we can get the same thing done in a fraction of the time, right? And really, like, you know, make them see that, believe that, and be able to do that themselves, so that, you know, it really significantly improve their whole workflow and that information collection. Because for us is what we see is like, hey, if they start, you know, collecting data in a much better way through an Otrafy platform, we now have access to a much larger data repository where we can now start running a lot more analytics on top, getting a lot of the insight out that they didn't have, right? One of the really cool thing that everyone loves from our customer side is essentially, like, you know, normally when they're just sending email, they have no idea when their suppliers are opening those emails and when they're responding, things like that, right? And we're like, hey, no, but since you've been doing this, we can now tell, like, everyone's active on Tuesday and Thursdays. For some reason, those are the 2 days that you get the most communication through. And so, like, you know, things like that really get people really excited about the potential and what we can do, and slowly move away from the traditional ways of just relying on those analog tools.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I think on a slightly different perspective, right? I think all of us know when we're selling to our core customer bases, there, you know, there's a certain already kind of base understanding. The difference is when you're explaining a new innovation, especially in food, to investors who may not come from that perspective, right? Maybe they're a tech investor. In their minds, we've romanticized how food happens, right? And the vast majority of people we talk to don't actually realize how food gets from point A to point B. And so when you're trying to convince an investor that you are doing this innovation that's going to revolutionize a world in which they had no idea existed, that is really where the struggle comes in. And I can't say that we do it particularly well. I think that's you're constantly testing different messaging, different things that you can do. And my only advice to tell people is that you are always tinkering with their messaging, but do it purposefully, right? So you're going out and you're testing messaging and seeing how people respond and making your changes meaningfully, not just, you know, willy-nilly, you know, oscillating between 3 or 4 different messaging positions.
Awesome. So speaking of advice, so we've talked a lot about kind of all of your journeys as you first came up with the companies, as you pivoted, as you now have had customers, investors. If you could go back and talk to yourself at just the very beginning, the concept stage, or to other entrepreneurs who are just getting going somewhere along the food value chain, what sort of advice would you give them? Sue, you want to kick us off?
Sure. And I'll go off from what Sam was saying on brand strategy. We just went through it at NetZero the last couple months, and it's been amazing. So it's like taking everything that was in my head and a couple other people who've been around the whole time and putting that into a strategy. Most of the stuff we know, we've just been doing it. And to Sam's point, we just weren't communicating it at a level where most people can understand it. So literally, like, they take this and then they put this together, this brand strategy guide, and they say, oh, here's what you do. And you're like, yeah, that's what we do. And how easy is that? I would have done that 2 years ago. And I had no idea at that time how important it really is on a marketing and communication side to be very clear and where most people can understand what you're doing.
Awesome. Nhat, what about you?
For sure. So if I go back to the beginning when I was starting the whole thing, I'll tell myself like, hey, whatever you're doing today is going to be absolutely different. You know, never don't get attached to it. You know, whatever you do, always on the lookout. And even I think I'm still telling myself today, like, you know, you never know, things will change again in the future. And you're constantly, you know, being open for opportunity, open for way to kind of continue to improve and make what you do a lot better. And make sure, you know, you continue to keep your team, you know, communicated with everyone, so that, you know, everyone's on the journey together. And for me, that's gonna really help me to. If I knew that earlier, definitely would, in the past would have made things a lot faster for sure.
Agree. That's great advice. And Leena? For me, it would be just like Nhat said, you know, stay open, stay nimble, you know, look for opportunities and enjoy the roller coaster, because entrepreneurship is all about that. So enjoy the small moments, enjoy the big moments, and, you know, stay focused, keep your enthusiasm. You know, if you wake up every morning thinking, oh my God, that's the first, you know, when I wake up in the morning, the first thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. And, you know, get pumped up about it. I think, you know, then you're on the right track.
Man,
there are some days, however, you like,
I'm going to talk to you in
what did I get myself into, right? But most of the times it's like, okay, you know, it's a new day.
I want to bottle that enthusiasm. That's great.
So Sam, what about you? If you could get back, what would you tell Sam?
Yeah, buy more whiskey. I don't no.
I don't need any more. Yeah.
I think I will say this is the one thing I tell people this a lot, right? There's a classic joke out there about pretty much any endeavor, right? It's gonna take 3 times as long and you need twice the amount of money that you think. That's always the case, right? And I think I always, in the beginning, I just stressed so much about like keeping to the original model, right? I said this, you know, in this deck or in this, you know, model, I've done this, and if we don't look exactly like that, we fail, right? And that's not the case at all, right? Everybody else in the world understands that this is fluid, that you're reacting to things that are on the ground, that we're all trying to solve hard problems, and we're uncovering additional hurdles as we go through the day, that you can't take, you know, an idea and hold it as like, you know, I said we're going to hit 10K in revenue this month and I didn't, and so we failed and we're out, right? Like those are the things that, you know, are mental things that you're beating yourself up on that nobody else will.
Awesome. Wonderful advice for us to end on. So huge thank you to all of our guests. You all were fabulous. We've got Leena from Canomiks, Sue from NetZero, Nhat from Otrafy, Sam from Big Wheelbarrow. Thanks again. We will watch for all of your journeys and really appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Stephanie. Nice meeting everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Good luck, everyone.